Hello and a very warm welcome to the UKAS webinar, Product Safety, Quality and Consumer Protection, the Role of Accreditation Post-Brexit. My name is Jamie Lindsay and it is my privilege to be your host. We have an excellent range of speakers for you today. In a moment, you will hear from Philip Rycroft. Philip has had a distinguished career as a civil servant in the Business Department, the Cabinet Office, and most recently as Permanent Secretary of the Department for Exiting the EU. Following his retirement, Philip joined UKAS as a non-executive director, and I cannot think of anyone better to introduce this webinar. You will also hear from Matt Gantley, the CEO at UKAS, Will Cresswell from the Office of Product Safety and Standards at BEIS, Leon Livermore of the Chartered Trading Standards Institute, and from Tim Rowntree of the MOD. Following these presentations, we will move into the Q&A and open discussion forum. This will be facilitated by Matt Gantley of UKAS, and the speakers will be joined by Emma Philpott of the IASME Consortium and Kevin Belson of UKAS. Just a few words about the ground rules. Please can be asked that you mute your microphone and turn off your camera, especially during the presentations. At any time during the event, however, please don't hesitate to use the chat function to submit questions or make comments. Your questions and comments will be taken during the Q&A discussion. Matt may ask you to repeat or amplify your question during the Q&A, and in which case, please turn on your microphone and camera. Also, please remember that you can use the raised hand function during the Q&A. Finally, the webinar is being recorded for those unable to attend in person, and copies will be made available to you. And just a few final words from me. I've had the honour of being the chair of UKAS for some years now. I nonetheless remain in awe at the breadth and depth of what UKAS accreditation is doing today and is capable of doing in the future as new challenges emerge. Our accreditation schemes continue to grow and multiply, spanning virtually all sectors and activities in our economy, our public services, and across public life and society as a whole. UKAS was established at the behest of government 25 years ago, and as the national accreditation body, it continues to serve government, UK PLC, and the British people in a remarkable and often unnoticed way, providing confidence and assurance in areas such as food, farming and the environment, consumer safety, product safety, and so forth. I hope you will find this session informative and stimulating. Now, I hope it will encourage you to consider UKAS accreditation as a solution to the many issues that you undoubtedly have lying ahead. Now, without further ado, let's hear from Philip Rycroft.
Hello, I'm Philip Rycroft. I was for over 30 years a civil servant, latterly in the Cabinet Office and the Department for Exiting the EU, and before then for a while in the Business Department, during which time I got to know UKAS very well. I'm delighted now to have the opportunity to serve on the UKAS board as a non-executive director. I've long believed that UKAS is a critical part of the infrastructure in the UK that supports high standards across the UK economy and gives consumers and businesses confidence in the quality of the goods and services they purchase. Accreditation is a powerful tool to support the driving up of standards and can be a highly effective and efficient complement to, or indeed substitute for, regulation. So UKAS and the services it offers should be a visible part of the toolkit for everyone in government concerned with standards in the economy and more widely. UKAS has a great reputation internationally and has a huge amount to offer to help provide solutions that facilitate domestic and international trade, protect consumers, and support business and government and our wider national interest. UKAS should be well known around government. I hope this workshop will go some way to developing a greater awareness of the work that UKAS does and its role in building confidence in the goods and services produced in the UK. Thank you very much and enjoy the workshop.
Philip, thank you very much. I now turn to Matt Gantley, Chief Executive of UKAS. Matt.
Thank you, Jamie. First of all, may I say thank you, everybody, for joining this webinar. This is a very important point for us to be able to communicate our role and to get feedback about how we move forward with these critical issues of product safety, quality and consumer protection. As Jamie mentioned, I'm the Chief Executive Officer of UKAS. Emily, could you move to the next slide, please? So in my presentation today, I'd like to just very shortly go through a number of key topics. Firstly, to introduce UKAS, to talk about our governance, to talk about the approaches to accreditation and how it fits within our national quality infrastructure, then to give some examples of how accreditation works, and particularly concluding on the value of accreditation and how that goes forward, particularly in relevance to international acceptance of product safety, quality, and ensuring consumer confidence in products that we buy and sell within the United Kingdom. So the UKAS actually can trace its history back over 54 years to the British Calibration Service, but we were appointed as the national accreditation body through the accreditation regulations in 2009. What's important to take from this slide is that we are a not-for-profit, non-profit distributing organisation, and we have over 3,000 accredited organisations that we accredit in the UK and also around the world. And we deliver that service over 31,000 assessment days per annum through a team of 265 people, including 190 assessment managers and over 700 external technical experts who are the forensics experts, the engineers, the product safety specialists, the quality specialists, ensure the evaluation of accreditation is done to the very highest level. Next slide, please, Emily. A key part of our structure is our governance, and this makes sure that consumers and government in particular can have trust in our strategy, in our policies and in our approaches. And our governance is based upon our members. We have 18 members who are, for all intents and purposes, our shareholders, and they come from 4 key colleges: from government, from customer groups, major trade associations representing our customers, business organizations and professional institutes who guide us in the way that we work to ensure that there's overall trust within the accreditation process. Next slide, please. One way of thinking about accreditation is the final step or the final level of control or the hierarchy of ensuring that conformity assessment in all of its forms, including inspection, testing, certification and verification, is done so to the very highest levels, is done so to the appropriate government regulations, product regulations and international regulations to ensure that it is competent, impartial and consistently delivered. And that ultimately then delivers that confidence and the trust and assurance to government, consumers and purchasers across the UK and globally. Next slide, please. Now, there are many examples of ways in which accreditation has been applied, and this gives us some demonstration of the key areas of focus for UKAS, but there are many, many more ways in which we support government. For example, the work that we do with the forensic science regulator in supporting assessments on site, or the MCERT scheme, ensuring that emissions are done so at the very highest level, or the emissions trading scheme, the EU emissions trading scheme for CO2 emissions, or the range of farm and farm assurance schemes, to the changes that are going on with building regulations through the Hackett review, or the quality of the water that we drink, and from food safety to the recent work that we've done on PPE and also on the Lighthouse laboratories, ensuring that pathology laboratories and COVID-19 testing is done so to the highest level. There are many examples of ways that UKAS supports government in ensuring that essential product safety, quality and consumer protection issues are done so at the very highest level. Next slide, please. Now that evidence base of the value of accreditation has been proven in many different case studies through work that's been done independently, for example, through Birkbeck College. They've done a very comprehensive study to understand the value of accreditation and the economic benefit that proved the direct benefit was around an additional benefit of economically of 300 million per annum to an indirect impact of a further 300 million to the UK economy, which is on top of the overall quality and service and confidence benefit to the UK economy. And that evidence base is building all the time, particularly with key international independent organizations such as the World Bank and OECD. Next slide, please. So the value of accreditation has been proven, and the case is building all the time in terms of its essential role in promoting trade, enabling innovation, helping build productivity within businesses, ensure that we can protect consumers, and support government to help improve and augment the value of regulation and inspection services for government departments and ministries. Next slide, please. Now, one perfect example of that is the CE marking, where there are very clear requirements for product safety. And underpinning CE marking across the European Union and across those products that are delivered that come into the European Union is essential aspects of inspection, testing and certification, which is then accredited in many different ways. And as we have exited the European Union, the new UK conformity assessment mark, as that comes into place, depending on how the UK EU trade deals work out, will be an essential part of ensuring that there is consumer confidence in the products that we send around the world, we export around the world, and we bring into the UK to ensure that essential requirements for inspection, testing, certification and verification are put into place. And UKAS has an essential role to play in that regard, to ensuring that there is that confidence, and that is enshrined within future free trade agreements. Can we move on to the next slide? And so going forward for UKAS, we alongside the very traditional aspects of consumer product testing and certification, we're working very hard on telecommunications validation, on aspects of the Internet of Things, of cybersecurity, of building information modeling. There are many different ways in which we evolve into the fourth industrial revolution, in which accreditation plays an essential role to provide consumer trust in the way that the world evolves in the future. Next slide, please. And going forward, whether it's drones or well-being, the Internet of Things, digital identity or blockchain, there are many ways in which accreditation plays an essential role in supporting government and supporting professional institutes to ensure that there is trust and confidence around the world. So in conclusion, on my last slide, I would just like to reflect on the importance of UKAS and its role in an international forum. Across the world, through the IAF, the International Accreditation Forum, or ILAC, International Laboratory Accreditation Program, we are an essential part of that program, and as well as our regional membership of EA, to be able to provide that confidence there is a mutual recognition of the products and the services and the accreditation that goes behind them, to ensure that a product is inspected, tested or certified once and is accepted all around the world, especially to ensure that there is a reduction in technical barriers to trade, and ensuring that trade, especially in a new global Britain, has given as much opportunity to ensure that free trade agreements are done so efficiently and effectively, while ensuring that consumer protection is protected at all times. So I look forward to speaking to you later on and hearing from your comments and your feedback, and to speaking with the other panelists to ask their views on this key issue of quality and consumer safety. Thank you very much.
Matt, thank you for that overview of UKAS. I now turn to Will Cresswell, Deputy Director at the Office for Product Safety and Standards at BEIS. Will.
Many thanks for inviting me to speak today. I'm going to tell you a bit about the Office for Product Safety and Standards and how we work with UKAS. So a quick bit about me. I, like Philip Rycroft, I've been a civil servant for many years. I've worked in DEFRA, Cabinet Office, Food Standards Agency, and now in the Department for Business. I forget then what BAE stands for these days. Anyway, moving on. Can I have my next slide, please? So yes, so we are the OPSS, Office of Product Safety and Standards. There is a departmental office of BAE's, and our purpose is to, quotes, to make regulation work. And it's about protecting people and enabling business to understand obligations and to flourish and thrive in a competitive but level playing field market. Part of our role includes the leadership of the standardization and accreditation policy, which of course includes the sponsorship and relationship with BSI and UKAS. That should read UKAS on the slide, not UK. Both of which are, of course, our national standards body and our national accreditation body. This is really important for us because we see standards and accreditation as being the fundamental baseline, if you like, for creating clarity in the market and, as we've heard from Matt, consumer confidence, and particularly consumer confidence around product safety. We have a role in managing product safety, legal metrology, not just metrology, but legal metrology, and hallmarking policy, and enforcing a range of legislation as a national regulator. We effectively cover everything that isn't food, vehicles, medicines and medical products, medical devices. So a very large and broad range of issues are covered by OPSS. Next slide, please. So as I say, we're a national regulator. We are the enforcing authority for currently 13 diverse EU directives which are being transposed or have been transposed into UK law as part of the transition away from the EU. And we have a key role in leading on product safety policy development. Some of those directives include things as broad as furniture and furnishings, pressure vessels, the low voltage directive, radio emissions, etc., etc. So a very broad range of things, as I've said. We also have oversight of something called the Market Surveillance Network, and we work very closely with other key regulators in government and local authority partners, particularly trading standards, who are key to ensuring that the market is well regulated. And as I say, standards and accreditation are absolutely fundamental to ensuring that we have the right baselines in place to ensure that regulation can work well. We also have an international role, and we work with the OECD and CIML, OIML, to ensure that standards are developed, and we have wide conversations with them about the application and use of standards in the regulatory context. We also have a leadership role in terms of risk and consumer and business behaviour, and again, standards form a fundamental part of that. Next slide, please. So we've heard from Matt that standards and accreditation are effective tools for delivering government policies, and this isn't just about BAE's. As we've seen, there's several other government departments are partners with UKAS, and the standards are used across a whole range of government policy areas in many departments, and this is about outcome-based regulation. Standards underpin regulation and conformity assessment. They help business and consumers to have confidence, as I've said, to ensure that products and services that they purchase meet regulatory requirements, which is often a product safety issue as well. So this is about confidence in the market and a level playing field. They can also be used as an alternative tool to legislation and regulation through the voluntary application of standards, and we see that in many places. And as we've heard from Matt as well, supporting innovation is a key interest of ours. We're thinking about the fourth industrial revolution and how standards and accreditation can really open up that market and ensure that the new and emerging technologies that we're seeing and the interconnectedness of those technologies are applied safely and clearly, so that people can have confidence in that market. Next slide, please. So what in the post-EU exit landscape, we're continuing, the government policy at the moment is of course, to follow a system that works well at the moment. So we are thinking about how we continue to ensure that the standards model that we have at the moment, the single standards model, and the accreditation model that UKAS so excellently applies is taken forward in the post-EU exit environment. This means that we'll have an autonomous standards and accreditation system, and again, this will be based on the international standards and agreements that are already in place and that we currently enjoy. And UKAS particularly enjoys an exceptional reputation in that arena. We will continue to support UKAS and BSI to ensure that the UK standards, the UK maintains our international standing. As I've said, there's both organisations are very well respected and have an excellent reputation in these fields. And I've talked about maximising the potential of the digital and fourth industrial revolution. That's a very key area, and we're working closely with colleagues on that, thinking about the future. And the final point is about encouraging the UK's national quality infrastructure partners to support the economic recovery after COVID-19. And there's many lessons that we're learning from that. I'm particularly interested in UKAS's innovation around remote accreditation, and the excellent work they're doing there to think about that. I think that's probably me.
Well, many thanks for sharing the OPS-NEST perspective with everyone. Can we then move on to Leon Livermore, who's Chief Executive at the Chartered Trading Standards Institute. Leon.
Thank you, Jamie. Just a couple of quick background to me, really. 33 years a qualified trading standards officer, working in the field of consumer protection and market surveillance. I ended up my career at Cambridgeshire as head of supporting businesses and communities, so I got a real sense of how citizens and consumers interact with businesses and how businesses interact with businesses and sorts of things we can do to facilitate that positively. And obviously I've been at the Institute now for about 7 years. I think the first point I wanted to make is when we talk about the UK, we're really talking about over 200 independent separate market surveillance authorities when you think about product safety. So it's delivered through local authorities, and each trading standard service is independent of other services. So we need to find a way to coordinate, but also get some mutual recognition there. And I think this is where we begin to, I suppose, explore accreditation and standards alongside legislation. So just as a matter of interest, because we've just been doing some work on the Food and Agriculture Bill around the potential for chlorinated chickens and American standards coming in, I just Googled this morning UK large chicken providers, and I found a company called Cargill's, and they hatch 2 million chickens every week. Now they pass those chickens out to independent farms, and those independent farms will grow the chickens against the various standards we have in place, and then they will be passed on to retailers, wholesalers, food manufacturers, and ultimately to the end consumer. Now, can you imagine something going wrong in that chain with 2 million chickens and the far-reaching effects of that? You've got legal compliance, so you've got food standards and welfare. You've got retailer and wholesaler requirements and manufacturer requirements placed upon that company, and then you've got consumer demand. So that's an inordinately complex supply chain. And actually, for us as a professional body or profession trying to support that company, actually accreditation really comes to the fore there. And that's accreditation, be it advice, and I'll talk about primary authority in a minute about accredited advice, but assurance schemes such as British Retail Consortium scheme or the Red Tractor scheme. So what in effect is a very simple transaction, supplying of chickens into the marketplace, has become very complex because of the way companies are structured, companies are financed. And then we begin to see, and we've seen, I suppose, with Whirlpool is a really good example of how a single failure in one component can have a huge impact across a whole range of products and be damaging not only to consumers, and you know, we've all seen the tragic instance of that, but actually damaging to companies' reputation and ultimately, you know, that company's viability. And these are companies that provide jobs. And given the fact we're emerging both from COVID, but are obviously going to have to deal with EU exit as well, actually the UK must be as robust economically as we possibly can. So I, as a profession, we tend to focus on proportionate advice and proportionate support for businesses. So you look at the size of a business, the complexity of a business, the risk of a business, and the history of a business. So if you're dealing with a massive, large company, they should be taking what's all called, you know, all reasonable steps and exercising all due diligence. And that's partly about the design process and making sure that the products that they design are safe and fit for purpose and meet current legislation. But the due diligence aspect of it is making sure that their systems and processes and those products and goods and services they provide remain safe and compliant all the way through that journey. And this is where we always point towards accredited laboratories, because that is the best advice, isn't it? That is the best place to look. We wouldn't think about taking a prosecution against a company unless we had a product tested by a UKAS accredited laboratory. It is the gold standard. It is the standard that can give confidence to businesses in business transactions. It can be the standard that gives confidence to consumers for them to look out, and it's easy for us to then point consumers towards these marks of conformity. But equally, and I think more importantly, it's going to become the standard for international trade. So I'll talk about the international trade in a moment. But if you move down the other end of that, if you like, that manufacturing chain, and you might have a small cottage industry. Now that small cottage industry may not have the cash flow to think about its own accreditation system, its own getting its own stuff tested. But what you would advise there is actually look at your suppliers. You know, so if you're going to buy a product to go into the thing you manufacture, make sure that that company that you're going to is actually accredited. That product is accredited. So that whole accreditation provides confidence at a high level and a very small local level throughout that whole supply chain. I touched on a couple of things. So I just really want to talk about primary authority, because this is a real example for me of where accredited advice comes in and where accreditation at a local level begins to augment and support accreditation at a national level. So we've always worked on a principle called home authority. So basically, if your Tesco's, your head office is in Hertfordshire, and you can go to Hertfordshire and get advice. And that seemed to work, and it seemed to work really well. But what the businesses were saying, and this is where we begin to listen to business, actually, that advice is only as good as the assurance given to that advice. So this is where primary authority came in handy and came in. So now when Hertfordshire give that advice to Tesco's or any of the companies that are primary authority for, that advice is accredited by Hertfordshire. It is statutory locked in and statutory assured, so other regulators can have confidence in that and have to take heed of that advice. And we would not think about giving advice in areas where there's a UK accreditation service unless that has been accredited by an appropriate laboratory. I also talked a little bit about, so I'm going to go all over the place because it's hard to fit in everything you want to say in about 7-8 minutes. about international trade. So we've done a number of pieces of work in partnership with actually central government, but also other partners across Europe, where we've been supporting accession countries into the European Union. And it's really interesting seeing what hoops people have to jump through to become part of the club. And they're probably a higher burden of proof and playing field for them to get inside that club than the members that are already in there. So we would have to show demonstrably that we have proper, robust systems of market surveillance. And that starts with the competence and quality and number of the officers on the ground doing that through the systems and policy and legislation framework, but actually the accreditation framework. So they're the three pillars that you look for in really underpinning trade deals. So it's really important that accreditation is linked appropriately and properly through to market surveillance, through policy and legislation. I just now want to talk just really quickly for 1 minute on how I see the roles, a burgeoning role for code of practice and standards. Legislation is blunt. It is thou shalt not, and it draws a bottom line, and it draws a very blunt, inflexible bottom line that is really hard to change. Now you think about some of the catch-up we've been trying to play in enforcement around the internet, where some of our legislation is 10, 15 years old, and that's never going to be able to keep pace with the changes in society and the changes in the economy, especially if it's properly facilitated innovation. So this is where you can have standards come in play and code of practice, because they move much quicker. So you think about the work that was done on the back of World Call, looking at product recalls, that ended up in a code of practice, and that code of practice was developed through a partnership arrangements with industry, consumers, and sector experts, and that took about a year to get out there, and we've done some training on that. But without the accreditation to support that standard, how do the consumers and business have confidence? So if we're going to see an increasing role for standards and code of practice, we need to make sure that they're accredited properly, that the companies that use these standards and use these badges can turn around and say, I can give you confidence, Mr. and Mrs. Consumer, I can give you confidence as a business purchasing my stuff, because my whole chain, my whole manufacturing chain, my whole supply chain has been accredited by people who had their own accreditation from UKAS. So it is the gold standard. It is where we would advise businesses. It's where we look to as market surveillance to make sure that that we're following those processes. So our labs will all be accredited. The labs we use will all be accredited. Our weights and measures facilities will all be accredited, because we believe that we should be leading the way. So in summary, it's really important that accreditation is seen as part of the UK economy, part of keeping businesses fair and competitive, and part of protecting UK consumers. I think that's all I really wanted to say.
Leon, thank you very much. That was excellent. Now, our final presentation comes from Tim Rowntree, Director of Engineering and Safety at the Ministry of Defence. Tim.
Thank you, Jamie. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, well, Jamie, thank you very much for the opportunity to talk today on this key topic for us. Like Philip and Will, I'm a long-term civil servant, 47 years in my case, so maybe we should count how many civil service years we've got on this call. It's probably quite a few. So if we go on to that's right. So yeah, as I say, vital topic for us right now, and quite frankly, as we've discussed, Jamie, defence product quality is not where it needs to be right now. So as well as the sort of challenges of the exiting the European Union, we do need to consolidate and build something better than we've had before in terms of the quality of delivered product into the Ministry of Defence. Because in the last couple of years, we've had major defence equipment actually returned from military use back to suppliers for rework through even serious safety concerns, which is bad for the reputation of the Ministry of Defence, bad for the reputation of UK industry. and of course, therefore bad for the reputation of UK. If we move on to slide 2 then, please. Thank you. Yeah. So I just wanted to stress here that the international context of this, this is not a UK sort of ring-fenced industry, certainly not in the in the defence world, and it's increasingly international. An aircraft like the F-35 you can see there just coming down onto the carrier is truly multinational. So to me, the vital thing is to make sure that our industries are able to step up to the plate to become solid and reliable, trustworthy partners into these international corporations. That's the key to success. So as well as being a trusted partner into global industries like Airbus in the commercial sector, there's also the foreign military sales system in the United States, there's the UKAS organization that I used to run, and of course the wider NATO procurement organizations. Slide, please. So just to anchor where the Ministry of Defence is coming from in terms of its policy on quality management system certification, these have proven to work for us in the past, and we can see a correlation between good product and the certification journey and the quality planning that goes in up front. So we only place contracts with our suppliers with appropriate quality management systems. And next, please. Thank you. And beyond that, we mandate accredited certification for high-risk projects, and we can actually and do use it as a commercial discriminator when we do equipment selection. In terms of our improvement journey, I'd like to say, Jamie, I'm really grateful for you putting me in touch with Chris Owen of the IATF, and we've had a few workshops since our last meeting where we're very keen to break out and use some of the principles of IATF and potentially build them into the AQAP, because at the moment with the fabric of the structures we've got, we can't really use anything like ATIF within our systems, but we can build principles into the systems that we have. Slide 5, please. In terms of standards, we use civilian wherever possible, and my standards team are absolutely beavering away at this. And I think in the last 12 to 18 months, we've seen a 40% increase in the number of civilian standards that are cross-referenced in our defence standardisation documents. So we are absolutely really making sure that we can make the very best from the commercial world. Beyond that, we have the NATO Allied Quality Assurance process and the Defence Standard 05057. And these two documents for military product provide access to our quality assurance field force for actually boots on the ground surveillance, which is the one of the final defences. But product certification, as I said, does need to be improved and focused, as I said at the beginning. So in the past, if we look at some of the projects I've been involved with, we've gone to a ship certifier and said, give us a certificate, please, because our regulation demands it. And we get a certificate and we say, thank you very much. Then we get a ship that has shortfalls, and then the dialogue is between us and our suppliers. And what we're really keen to do is bring the certifying bodies into that. And I'm really pleased in the last weeks and months our certifying bodies have engaged. And I think we need a dialogue on the risk areas and how we would treat them and how we want our certification body to work with us, so that we target the certification activity, whether it's on the QMS certification or boots on the ground, to make sure that we hit the key risks, and so that we can jointly get a confidence that the outturned product will be fit for purpose. Slide, please. So the key points. Third-party certification directly influences our supplier selection decisions, and it's a vital lever for our quality product. Having an industry base with effective quality management systems does make a difference. And just as a little anecdote, I delivered a talk to the our executive committee just over a year ago on some very topical quality issues we'd had with some major defence programs that were issued. And I said, well, my take on it is that the the problem started very early in the project because we didn't get proper certification and proper quality planning in at the very beginning. And they gave me a challenge. They said, okay, then look at your project base and tell us what's going to be the next delivered quality problem. And you know what? My team actually predicted it dead right. We looked at for a project that didn't have the right quality management plans in place, and sure enough, as we speak here today, we can see major problems emerging on that contract. So we're absolutely on that. So standardization is also on that last bullet key to this. It builds in standardization so that we can have logistic support chains with things that fit each other, standard fuels and all that. But that also enables exports, which is going to make our industries more successful. And of course, multinational operations across NATO depends on common interoperable equipment. So leading on to the questions, next slide, please. Thank you. So, we do require better management systems and product certifications outcomes to deliver the right first-time quality to the front line, as I've just said. I'd be very interested in any panel ideas or thoughts on how we can do better on that, and I've mentioned a couple of the initiatives as I've gone through. The cooperation of UKAS we see as vital, and I'm hugely grateful to the assistance that UKAS has given us in pulling together the certification bodies and actually having that dialogue in how we raise our game. And I'm hoping that that will help, you know, the wider UK in terms of really making sure we are a reliable quality partner in the post-Brexit world. And finally, that point on counterfeit material. Some 30 of my quality assurance field force staff have been deployed these last months with the National Health Service, and we've been using our interface with UKAS to verify the certification of personal protective equipment buys. And the statistics are that of 7,087 proposed PPE buys that were in train, we found 221 suspect certifications of either product or QMS, which we stopped. And I think that's a great testament to the fantastic work of the UKAS. And the UKAS were really great in helping us track down these certification claims and testing whether they were valid or not. So Jamie, thank you to your organisation. You've been a key ally through the COVID-19 challenge. That completes my piece. Thank you very much.
Tim, thank you very much for sharing your experience of using accreditation in your field. Now we move on to the Q&A discussion. Matt will be facilitating. Matt, as well as the presenters on the panel, we've got two additional panelists joining. One is Dr. Emma Philpott, MBE. She's Chief Executive of the IASME Consortium. And for anyone who doesn't know what IASME stands for, the IASME is the Information Assurance for SMEs Consortium. And also joining Matt will be Kevin Belson, who's a technical manager at UKAS. So Matt, over to you to as you were, steer this next segment.
Thank you very much, Jamie. Thank you again for the panel speakers. I think they've been excellent. They're really focused on the key issues that we face at this time. So first of all, I'd just like to turn to Emma. Thank you very much for joining us in this session. IASME is a sister organisation of UKAS in many ways, and we have very common objectives in ensuring trust and confidence, particularly in GDPR and cyber security. We're well on our way into the fourth industrial revolution. Will Creswell touched upon that as the importance it plays in the Department of Bays for the National Industrial Strategy. Could you tell us more about your view about the importance of accredited certification as part of ensuring that there is confidence in cybersecurity, especially for small and medium-sized enterprises?
Yes, well, thank you very much for inviting me. This is very close to our heart. As you know, we usually focus on the lower end, smaller companies and less mature companies, and try and help them get up to the level where they can get a UKAS certified certificate. So we really see ourselves as the kind of the training and the groundwork, and they can get a certificate to show that they've been doing that. But the aim, if they are mature enough and if they are of a certain size, is to get up to have a UKAS accredited certification in security, because that really is the badge to show that they have reached that level, and obviously should maintain it.
Thank you very much, Emma. Kevin, you've spent many years at UKAS and representing us on international panels. UKAS is seen as the gold standard, as Leon has mentioned, and is respected around the world. Do you see that changing as we as we have exited the European Union and as we forge new free trade agreements across the world?
Thank you, Matt. Yes, hello, everybody. No, in short, I don't see that changing at all. I think UKAS has been an established part of the international accreditation community for such a long time now that I think the fact that we are leaving the European Union won't affect particularly our influence in those areas. We already are leading and deeply involved in a number of key initiatives with the IAF and ILAC, aimed at some of the things some of the speakers today have spoken about, ironing out the problems with product certification, management systems, other areas, and generally driving for improvement. So I think that will continue, because we will continue that level of involvement in the international organizations.
Thank you, that's excellent. Now, we've had a couple of points that have come through on the chat facility, and let me take this opportunity just to remind everyone that over the next 10 minutes or so, we have the opportunity to ask this excellent list of panelists some key questions. So please don't miss that opportunity to raise a question or put a point across. But I'd like to turn to Tobias from BEIS, a really valid point, which is there a need for better joined-up coordination across government to identify priority areas for development of standards? I think particularly in the context of the fourth industrial revolution, to support new tech and to support the critical national defence systems and other key sectors. Will, would you mind if I come to you with that question? How is the Department for Business and Energy and Industrial Strategy working together with other key departments to foment much greater understanding of the value of standards and accreditation?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. I think that's a really good question, actually. And I think, again, I'm new to the area in terms of policy responsibility, but I think my sense is that we do need to better join up. As I pointed out in my presentation, there are many departments that are involved in standards and accreditation and use them in the way we regulate and develop legislation. But I was particularly struck by some things in Tim's presentation, I think there's something I'd like to take away, particularly and look into how we join up with other departments. I know my team do talk to departments, but again, in the context of the fourth industrial revolution, we're working closely with colleagues in the Better Regulation Executive to think about the issues there. And I know when I go to international fora, as I've said, such as the OECD, and we're talking about product safety, that's a key concern that other countries around the world have, and standards sits right smack in the middle of that. So there are live conversations going on, and they could be better joined up, I think, probably. And it's something I'm going to take away and look at.
Thank you very much, Will. We've got two questions that come in from Andy Evans at Gambika and Jeremy Hodge. I'd like to, if I can, bring those two questions together. For Leon, trading standards, I think. Obviously, these are changing times for all government bodies, for all organisations. And particularly as we've now exited the EU and have new trade deals, and those complex supply chains continue to play a really important part. They're often supplied directly into the UK. That puts quite a strain on market surveillance. Leon, what reassurances can you give that the market surveillance approach is joined up and is working with industry to identify gaps that it has in its own resources and capabilities to be able to make sure that there is a robust system?
I mean, I think a couple of points. I think the first point I'd make is that when you look at the amount of money and resources committed to market surveillance and product conformity, it is spent by businesses, actually. So I think there's been a greater recognition over probably the last 10, 15 years that the UK by and large has some of the most responsible businesses there. So it's about how we can support businesses to understand their supply chains, how they can then get that right. And we're certainly working with colleagues or with standards and other places on the current code of practice of market surveillance. I think there's some challenges here. To just give you a sense of context, since about 2010, there's been about 60 to 65% cuts in the resources the UK has to undertake market surveillance, and that's the frontline trading standards. And at the same time, we've seen an increase in the legislative burden there. So the UK system is still primarily geared up to doing market surveillance at the point of sale. And as we all know, if you look at any supply chain, the risks happen at elsewhere. It doesn't happen on the shop floor. By the time it hit the shop floor, that's too late. So this is where I think we really need to see central government taking a key role. And we support actually the formation of the Office of Product Safety and Standards, because if you look at the areas that have suffered least cuts in local authorities, they've been the ones where they've had strong central government leads turning around and saying, these are the really important areas that we want. So the first thing is actually strong joined up government giving directions to local authorities and local regulators about what's key and important. And the second area is understanding intelligence. Now, most of our intelligence will come from citizens' advice. So it is skewed, if you like, towards consumer issues and consumer matters. So it's how we then layer on top of that the contextual information that businesses have. My experience, I chaired the Government's Used Car Commission. The richest data and the richest intelligence on the car industry sat within the car industry. So it's how we can then use the lens of COVID and EU exit to bring consumers, regulators, and businesses together on a sector-by-sector basis to understand, what's important and how we intervene in the right place. And I think the final point I make is we need to understand the different routes to market. So we've certainly seen with COVID and PPE, but we saw that a few years ago with things like hoverboards. Actually, the traditional routes to market where you have a wholesaler, so an importer bringing in goods from the Far East and then supplying a number of wholesalers and retailers in that way has gone. And people like Amazon and eBay and fulfillment houses means there's a lot more direct purchasing going to go on, both from businesses sourcing, but also consumers directly sourcing. So we need to understand how we regulate that and how we support that, and how we give the technical expertise and technical tools to our profession. So look, there's lots of good work going on. I think there's a recognition of the amount of work that businesses do. I think there's a willingness to cooperate and coordinate, but we've only got a certain amount of resource in the system, and it's how we direct and point that in the right direction to aid the UK's recovery.
Leon, thank you very much for that comprehensive answer. If I could turn to Tim. Tim, you've had a very distinguished career, and over that time dealt with some of the very biggest quality projects, from major defence spending projects to probably some of the very smallest kind of projects. There's been such a huge variety of supply chain challenges that you've dealt with within your career. Could you give us some reflections on especially the very recent issues that we've seen with the Ministry of Defence supporting the Cabinet Office with the purchase of personal protective equipment for the NHS, of where you see the improvements that need to be put into place to ensure that government works together to ensure that there is agility in delivering consumer product safety and standards going forward? Could you just touch upon what your recent reflections are and where we need to work together to improve this national quality infrastructure?
Yeah, thanks. And I noticed on the instant message, Vince actually made that point that I talked about, the need to get the message out and across business, and he suggested a question on that. Certainly I've benefited hugely from having that cross-fertilization of ideas with IATF and some of the wider certification bodies. So I think there is something we need to connect into with BEIS and the other organizations. Certainly we were lucky in the COVID crisis that we had a system of kind of how quality certification and quality planning works, which was of a higher level. I don't want to sound pejorative, but in a sense, it was more of a strategic way of managing these things than was normally the use in the NHS. So the NHS joining together with my team had really made a fantastic sort of synergistic relationship. And I think between them, they really got something working that got through a lot of equipment procurement, including, these ventilators that were built from scratch, which again, were a huge certification challenge because we were certifying as we were building them. So, that sort of getting that message out, and so everybody's prepared with the landscape of how this stuff should work, and the real importance of a certification strategy and a certification plan, and then making sure that you make it risk-based. And I think what we haven't done in the past, as I mentioned in my discussion, was we've never really thought about, or we haven't systemically thought about what was the risks that we encountered last time we built a ship, last time we built an armored vehicle or an aeroplane. Therefore, for the next one, how do we work with certification bodies and the organizations like the UKAS so that those risks are sort of drawn out and nailed on the next one? I have to say that the ADS, the Association of Defence Suppliers, has been very forward-leaning on this. So we do have some good industry engagement as well to help us on this journey, because they recognise it's absolutely in their interest too. Does that help?
It very much helps. Thank you very much for that perspective, Tim.
Thank you.
Emma, would you mind if I turn to you? You're by no means a representative for small and medium-sized enterprises, but the focus of your organisation is to ensure that there is greater reassurance within SMEs of the challenges of new technology and cybersecurity. What perspectives would you give on helping of the national quality infrastructure could do to ensure there's agility and focus on the needs of small enterprises?
So, I mean, there's lots of things, small things, they seem small to us, but it probably makes a big difference to the smaller companies. So I think a lot of small companies are they're worried that they don't understand the language. And that's a big barrier, because even when they start looking at standards and the guidance around it, they often don't understand the language. So it's a case of trying to find ways to communicate to them in ways that they can understand. And it doesn't seem like it's a task that's too difficult. I think it's actually a lot easier to comply and gain a lot of these standards than it seems to people who have no experience in that world at all. Obviously, there's a big driver for people who've been told they have to get it because it's, a life-changing contract at the end of the day, and they are the ones that are going to put in the extra effort. But to engage with all the others, we need to make it easier. And we need to, not easier as in a lower standard, but easier for them to engage and understand and find guidance, ideally open guidance, so they can find out about the costs and the information about it before actually committing themselves. I think there's a big fear that it's going to be very complicated, very time consuming and difficult, and very, very expensive. So the more that we can do to give them information in ways that they can understand it, and they can understand the benefit to their business, the better, I think.
Thank you very much, Emma. We've only got a minute left now, but I would like to give the kind of final comments and opportunity to Will. Will, we've heard a lot from the different panelists today of the importance of the UK's national quality infrastructure, and as the key sponsoring department for standards and accreditation in the United Kingdom, what would you say, I guess, are the key messages that you would like to deliver of how we need to work together to support BEIS as a department, and obviously to ultimately deliver that consumer product safety? And latterly, ensuring that we reduce those technical barriers to trade in the new future trade agreements?
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, so clearly we've got an opportunity now, because in exiting the European Union, there's a lot of refocusing and rethinking about the standards and accreditation process and the environment, and how we take ourselves forward in terms of the opportunities created with that on a wider international landscape, and indeed in negotiating free trade countries. There's been a lot of discussion today about better joining up across government, and I think that's probably right. I think I'm certainly taking away some things to discuss with my team. You'll see in the chat that one of my colleagues, Richard Sanders, has just highlighted the fact that we are about to launch a new NQI webpage on government.uk, which I think goes to address some of the questions about the visibility of the NQI in terms of the developing international and indeed the UK industrial strategy. There's lots to be said and done on the fourth industrial revolution, and I think that's gathering pace at the moment. So it's a very live and interesting conversation across government and indeed with industry. And I've been thinking also about how we better engage. There's a point about market surveillance in the chat about better engaging with industry to ensure market surveillance. And one of the approaches we're thinking about is a systems-based approach to how we regulate. So there's so many things in this area. It's a very interesting and live conversation across government departments at the moment. And I look forward to continuing to work very closely with UKAS to deliver the excellent work they're doing at the moment. Thanks.
Will, thank you very much with that. And thank you, everybody, for participating in the questions. Thank you very much to all the panelists for their time. And with that, I'll pass back to Jamie.
Matt, thank you. And I must echo your thanks, Matt, on behalf of everyone, the 40 plus people who've participated and joined today's session. I must echo thanks to all the speakers, to the panelists, and indeed to the very valuable contributions you've had on the meeting chat line. Thank you for sharing your experience and expertise as to how accreditation and the other key parts of the national quality infrastructure can genuinely underpin product safety and quality, can underpin customer confidence, supply chain confidence, and ultimately consumer confidence. So it's been a very useful session. I hope you've also found it useful. If any of you out there who have been with us today would like to engage with UKAS to understand better how accreditation might help you with issues that you're facing, don't hesitate to contact us. But thank you all, and thank you to our speakers most of all.
Thank you, Jamie.